معقولة. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. With me is Gal Aga. And we're going to be talking today about buying process as a service. We're going to unpack some of these ideas, these transformations that are going on. So really excited to have Gal with us. Hi, Gal. How's it going?
Hi. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, and Gal, I've known Gal for a few years already. A very, very seasoned veteran of the sales organizations and sales leadership. So Gal is the CEO and co-founder at Aligned, who are basically reinventing and creating, leading the category of the digital sales room, and really enabling buyers with more streamlined processes. And I know Gal will share with us more on that later on. He has over 17 years in sales leadership roles and in the sales industry, before starting Aligned, VP sales at Site, before that director of sales at Sisense. He managed twice to get companies from, what is it, 1 to 10 million ARR? Is that it?
Yeah.
Wow. Which for anybody who's done that knows that's pretty much magic. I mean, that's next to impossible. And then on one occasion from 20 to 100 million. So kind of the whole gamut of building and scaling sales organizations, building go-to-market. So super, super excited and thrilled to have Gal with us today. And let's cut to the chase. So this whole talk started when I came across one of Gal's posts on LinkedIn mentioning these transformations of how buying processes are being changed and how sellers need to evolve. And what caught my eye was a term that he used was buying process as a service. The reason it caught my eye is because it gave a structure to these transformations that we're seeing. Came across the other day that the term crisis, right? Crisis, originally from Latin, is a change. It's basically a change before and after. And I think we are really at that change point where things that worked a few years ago no longer work. The way that buyers behaved a few years ago are no longer relevant. So we're really at a very significant transition point and a very fundamental paradigm shift. And I think for us as founders of tech companies, I think this is really kind of what we live for, those transition moments, those shifts and breaks in the market. But besides that, the main topic is really to learn more about that. So, Gal, I'm asking you, what is buying process as a service?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that intro. So I think I'm going to start with that and kind of take it, I think, a bit deeper. Like, really, in a nutshell, it's a way that I see the role of really the salesperson today, right? We're no longer selling. It's no longer about selling to a prospect and focusing on driving certain sales stages or rigid sales stages that I want someone to go through, like the demo and the pilot and the negotiation, and solve for. And my role is just to give information and try to let the buyer make most of the process, most of the decisions, most of the evaluation, and most of the process of their own. Rather, like the salesperson today, the mindset that's working, and I think that's always been the top. The top sellers have always behaved like that. But I'll unpack that a bit more. Why I think things are changing. Everyone should behave like that. So really, the role of the salesperson today is not selling to your buyer, rather working with your buyer to help them buy. I think that the best sellers have always done that, but right now all sellers need to be facilitators of buying tasks, and not people who focus on how do I do more, rather how do I do better and solve for helping my buyer, my prospect, digest information rather than get information from me as a seller. So I think that's kind of just on the mindset part of it, and that's where we can start unpacking things a bit more. But if we can if everything kind of basically start with that post, about that post kind of mentioned, and I know it got a lot of good good comments and a lot of attention on that specific phrase because it resonates a lot deeply with salespeople that understand what it means. But I think there's a bigger context and a bigger lesson here in a strategy that can be implemented by marketeers and overall organization, and I can talk about that a bit more. So so let's take a step back. So basically, the way that I'm saying it, everyone has been talking about growth at all cost era, right? Where we had, until 2022, basically, where everything ended. It was all about growing as fast as possible, and efficiency wasn't a big part of it. And if you look at sales organizations, then the way that from all of the research and everyone we speak with, it feels very clear that we were just in a mode of could get away with selling, meaning what companies were doing, they were hiring just armies of undertrained SDRs and told them, hey, here's the 16-step sequence, and just go push that at scale. Taught them to play the numbers game, feel a shallow personalization line here and there, and just call it a day. And we allowed AEs to go out there also at rookie level and just run a feature-focused demos, an interrogation-like discovery, push their sales stages and run salesy follow-ups, and kind of didn't maintain the quality that much. And just having that sales-centric, more experienced mindset, let's just bring more people and get them out there with that level of experience, it worked. And the way it worked, the reason that it worked, we were just able to get away with it. It's not that that's what the buyer wanted, but we were able to get away with it. And
why? That's what I want to press. Why did that work before, and why doesn't it work now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when buyers are in the mode of there's budget and we can buy, and it's like a balance of forces. Okay, one thing is the forces in the market. So when money is cheap and everyone are buying and you can easily make decisions, then okay, not fully understanding why I have to buy, but and the AE is not doing a good job at that. But okay, let me try to bring this up with my manager, and I just have one or two people to approve with because there's less scrutiny. So okay, that flies, right? And so that's one thing. But that's like the recent. If you look at the recent years, right, everything like shut off in one.
But the change started earlier, right? The change started earlier. It was just covered with a lot of money in that year.
It was just covered with a lot of money, exactly. So if you look at other things that were going on, then you see that buying basically just over the years has become more complex. There's a ton of research around that where if you look at just the last 2 years about categories, there are 20% more categories in 2 years, not vendors, categories. Wow. And a number of, it's crazy. If you look at the numbers in terms of number of stakeholders involved, there are 4x more stakeholders in a decade, from like 3 or 4 to 12 on average today. So Gartner and Forrester both published a lot of research around this. And if you look at overall the levels of information that we have, right? Everyone has a blog, everyone has a podcast, everyone is on LinkedIn. There's just everywhere. I can access it. So easy to access information. My problem is not starvation for information, it's indigestion of information. Okay? Mm-hmm. So we moved from a point where the salesperson was there at the front. Let's go really back, right? The salesperson was the source of information. That was the person where me as a buyer would go and learn more about the category. But right now I'm educated, like also on the marketing side, right? There's a ton of research that go out all the time that talk about at what point in the journey, in the buying journey, do you even contact sales? And do you contact sales to get educated or get validation and just negotiation, bring me a price, and things like that? See what I'm saying?
Right. Yep.
That's one side. So one side is buying complexity. because of the information categories, stakeholders, more all that. And then budget scrutiny, of course, added just more complexity. Okay.
Right.
And now the second thing is buyer behavioral change. And this is something that we talk about a lot at Line. We call it, we say that we basically shifted into a buyer-led era. And what does that mean? If you look basically at all of the shifts and forces that have happened in recent years, you understand that you right now, like everyone is a consumer, is a B2C consumer, right? First, so we're buying Teslas online, and then we're going and we're buying software. As you know, we have two hats: we have our real lives and our work lives. So Amazon took over the world, and you have Teslas, and you have all of these things. So that changes also how we buy in B2B. Secondly, look at the generational shift, right? Gen Y, Gen Z are now, according to Forrester, 71% of the decision-making group. Okay, and who are these Gen Y, Gen Z people? They were born, okay, with the phone in their hands. They're more digital oriented. They're behaving differently. Now, a few more things is PLG. We're all self-serving and self-researching and asking ChatGPT, right? So all of that has led to another big stat, which is not only buying is getting more complex, but it's happening when the salesperson is not in the room. Okay, Gartner basically talks about 95% of the buying journey happens without the salesperson in the room.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, makes sense?
Yep.
Good. So basically, these are the reasons. These are the shifts that have happened throughout the years. And I think just the shift from that growth at all costs into post-growth at all costs, into the efficient growth, right, that we're all trying to drive right now, just kind of pushed everything to the edge. Because it's now also so hard with the budget scrutiny and everything, and it even increased the number of decision-making groups more. So that affected everything. So then if you now look at how all that affects the sales team, then essentially the way that we're seeing it, the average, that sales-centric average experience is just failing. The average salesperson is failing, and the numbers show it. So you have 35%, according to RepView, there's 35% quota attainment rate. So in the last year, no, sorry, 35% of sales teams have hit quota in the last year. And it's not got
only 35%, right?
Yeah, only 35%.
Wow.
Exactly. So basically, the sales experience is failing. You can see that also in more research. So Gartner is saying that 3 out of 4 buyers prefer to avoid speaking with the salesperson. Okay, so it can be throughout the sales process, ghosting, doing more of their critical buying tasks on their own, or to try as much as possible to not have a salesperson engagement, stay behind the scenes. Okay, all these things are changed. If you look at the reply rates are free falling for now for 2 or 3 years. Google introduced spam policy changes. So that's basically it. So buyers are just ghosting single-threading sellers who don't add value because they can go solo, and because things are more complex, they prefer to do it try to solve it alone if they don't feel that you're adding enough value, or they just opt out for an easier status quo, or for competitors who were able to make things easier. Okay,
so maybe before we talk about how to solve this, just to kind of tie those things and those validation points of why do we feel that there is such a crisis and what are the numbers behind it, or what is happening. So you mentioned the complexity, the increasing complexity. So an explosion of vendors, right? I remember, so we're specifically in MarTech, like the most exploded, I think, category ever, right? So with every year you get 8,000, 9,000. So choosing that vendor, we have explosion of information, which also us as consumers, we're constantly putting gates between our attention and the information, because there's no human way to process all that information. So gating all of that for us becomes the standard. It's not like I need to seek information. I'm just trying to control the flow of information inwards. And then we get to the fact that sales have, without them knowing, have shifted a position from the information suppliers to something else, which we are still figuring out, or they're still trying to figure out of what really is their role now, if it's not to provide that information. So this is kind of where we're at the moment, and would love to hear how you're kind of thinking about the solution and how companies and B2B GTM organizations need to kind of shift their perspective, their work, and their playbooks. Pretty much, I think there's a lot of rebuilding of pretty much a lot of those things from the ground up.
No, yeah, I think perfect summary. Absolutely. So more complex, more buyer-led, all of these shifts, leading to the way that I'll say it is just the average salesperson is becoming redundant, and there's a risk really to the economic model of that no really great discovery skills or no great demo skills and not adding enough value. Just, hey, here's a product and here's information. If you're at that level, it's just not, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And okay, and I'll talk about that more. So basically the solution is, Gartner has been talking about this for a long time, and we kind of developed the idea even more and try to build more frameworks around it. But there's a lot that's written down around what Gartner calls buyer enablement, okay? Which essentially, it's not a go-to-market strategy, okay? It's not a tactical framework. It's essentially a holistic approach that for the go-to-market org, okay, led by the CRO, to go and equip the entire go-to-market organization with tools and content and processes and skill training to make sure that it's more focused on the buyer. Okay, so the classic sales enablement is let's bring sales content and let's bring sales training, but buyer enablement essentially goes more focused on the buyer. What are the buyer's critical tasks? What is the buyer journey? What are they doing? What tools can we implement that would make our experience of working with us better? Experience of interacting with EA is more convenient, more helpful, more about digesting information versus throwing information. How do we adapt our sales process to be more buyer-led, to understand that things are happening without us when we're not there in the room, and support buying journeys when we're not in the room, right? So there's a lot of content around this, very interesting from Gartner, and they talk about this a lot. So that's basically the concept, and I can definitely break it down even more.
Yeah, let's unpack this, because I think that a few of our probably listeners and audience, this sounds a lot like marketing work, right? If we're talking about building assets or enabling the buyer journey or supporting it, that's a lot of I hear a lot of marketing talk. So I'm curious to kind of unpack this and the integration between sales orgs, which has a purpose and needs to redefine it and re-understand it. So I'd love to hear kind of how you look at that solution from a holistic GTM perspective. And maybe, again, just using kind of classic titles just so that we can position them correctly in terms of who needs to do what under this new framework.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know, but because there's a thin line with product marketing and enablement, and a lot of times like people do a lot of the same things, then definitely that's why I think it's very similar. I won't get deep into that discussion. I think that's a separate one. But yeah, I think it's relevant for both the marketing and the revenue organization to kind of sit together and design this. So, so I think first and foremost, if I'll talk about the sales team quickly, just to get that to make that a bit clearer. I think that first, most training, if you look today at most sales training, it's focused on here's a discovery skill, and here's how to negotiate, and here's how to do this, here's how to run a demo, right? It's a lot of what do you need to do to be better, and here's how good looks like in terms of a good demo or a good negotiation, etc. And so what sellers don't know is they understand how to run the sales process, but they don't fully understand what a typical buying process looks like for your organization. And a lot of, like, you'll be surprised, like most people are surprised when they check this, how much their sales teams really don't know and they're unsure. So it first would start with having your enablement team plus marketing or someone kind of doing these interviews, the customer interviews, and going to understanding at what point of the journey they contact you, how do they build requirements, how do they compare vendors, how do they get funding and approvals and build consensus internally, what kind of typical concerns and objections and things that come up. So it's like, can someone really go and present a deep research to the sales team to tell them, here's like all the things that they're going through and how they're approaching it? Like, they just don't know, okay? They know individual cases. You can interview them as well, by the way, and get some individual experiences from them, but that's the first phase. Second thing is, as a sales leader, it's all these things that we're talking about, sales leader, revenue, go-to-market leader, we buy software. Okay, the sales team or the CS team or the SDR teams, they have not bought software before. And it's easier for us to relate because a lot of these things is we were on these discovery calls and got interrogated, or we were on a demo call and got like, just here's information and I need to connect the dots to why I should buy and why I should buy now, right? Or we were in the back and forth email chaos, so many links and attachments, and I can't really understand how to make a decision with everything that's been presented throughout this process. So the second thing that I would go and do is go and really teach reps exactly why buying friction leads to them losing revenue, how that leads to indecision. One of the biggest diseases is buyer indecision. I'm not understanding, why do I need to buy, how to sell this internally, how to gain consensus, or how to evaluate the product. Like, that kind of thing is basically the friction that leads to indecision, and indecision is basically, I'm not sure, but this competitor rep knows better, or I'm not sure, do nothing seems easier, right? So a lot of sales people just don't connect the dots because they've not been in these shoes. Just go and really show them and explain and show a process and help them understand that. That's the second thing. Third thing is, I would go and build research and really help break down the modern buyer expectations and statistics, okay? Understanding that so much of the buying journey happens when you're not there. Understanding what are Gen Y and Gen Z and how they behave differently versus regular, or not regular, versus older generation buyers, okay? So understanding all of these things and how it's not about information starvation, rather information indigestion. When they better understand the research and what's behind the modern buyer, get to know the modern buying behavior more, I think they'll be able much more to relate. The second thing that I would do, not the second, I think that's the fourth, probably, or third, fourth. So
Word fourth.
Yeah. So if you will look at the sales process, the way that most sales processes are built is they're really overly fixed on the sales meeting. Okay, so you have the demo, you have the proposal, you have the trial, or whichever meetings, right, you run in your sales process. And what happens is that they lack a lot of critical overlap with the buying tasks. So, for example, I'm going through requirement building, I'm going through business case building, total cost of ownership calculation, I have a discussion with the CFO, which is a different discussion than other discussions. And so while we're going through these key 4 stages, that most sales processes really are not built enough to drive overlap with buyers' internal tasks. So, and if buying right now is happening so much when we're not there in the room, then a relook at the sales process to design it in a way that fits a bit more the buying journey, and building a lot of optional paths that you can take based on the buying process right now that the customer in front of you is taking. That's another big thing that I would do. And then 2 more points, or 3. So 3 last things. So there's seller skills. I think that today the complex sales is no longer a synonym for enterprise sales. It used
All
to be
sales.
yeah, all sales is complex. Exactly. It used to be a synonym. You say complex sales, it's basically enterprise sales. It's the same thing. And transactional sales was SMB, and it's always been more about the sales process than the buying process. It was about just work more deals, make less touch points, play the numbers game, move quickly. But SMB sales today have 3 to 8 stakeholders. Okay, that's just not a transactional process. These stakeholders are going to want to have more meetings and more angles and more challenges and so on.
And it doesn't matter that it's a 10K transaction versus 100 or $500,000. You're still going to go through those motions, right? CFO is still going to be, especially after, these years of scrutiny and efficiency, like you mentioned, which even if we climb back, it's still not going to go back to the 2020 years where it was just like pouring money and nobody was pretty much looking at anything.
Exactly. So I think what a lot of companies are experiencing right now is that junior level sales reps that was able to sell SMB because the work was less it was just simpler than right now. They need to manage multiple stakeholders and more scrutiny, and they need to do these things and maybe help build the business case, and they just don't know. These are skills that they don't have. So essentially, it's like making these skills mainstream. Champion building, multi-threading, co-creating assets like business cases, building mutual action plans. All of these things need to become a bit more mainstream into this skill that a lot of sales teams can use. So I can stop here for a second because that's a lot, and that's about sales. I think the last few is more marketing and sales combined. So marketing, yeah.
Yeah. So before we maybe go and touch marketing, I think the changes you describe have a big impact on the profile of the new sales account executive, right? If I understand correctly from what you're talking, first of all, it is a deeper understanding of the buyer, their processes, the product. So the level of expertise and the capability to go in depth, as opposed to kind of just execution of playbooks and say, look, I got my playbook. It worked here, here. Give me my meta, give me my, whatever. Are you basically saying that also has an impact on recruiting, on hiring? Do VP sales now have to change their way of hiring or vetting candidates?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that the level needs to go up. There's just no other way. If only 35% of salespeople are hitting targets, then the writing is on the wall. It's not that we're going to go back. There's no one day the growth at all costs was over and we went from 0 interest to where the interest is today, ZERP era, how everyone call it, and all that. And now it's going to go back, and then let's go back to going wild. It's going to take a lot of time. That's what everyone is talking about. And there's the behavioral shift that drove, like COVID drove behavioral shifts, right? And COVID, by the way, is another big part of the behavioral shift at the buying side. So if things have changed so much and the writing is on the wall in terms of the performance numbers, then yeah, we need to level up the sales skills. But so far I spoke mostly about the seller's skills or the level of sellers, or the skills that you can coach the sellers, and the sales process and things that you can do in terms of training. But then you can also implement tools, and you can focus enablement on the buyer to help the seller. So if I'm not really, so there are things that you can solve with filling up a skill gap, and there are things that you can solve with technology, with just enabling tools that are not technology to help them do a better job.
So first of all, I urge you all to go and visit Aligned, try the product again to help get everybody on the same room and the same page. Use it myself, and I think this is really kind of where selling is going to. So from this point, maybe we can transition and talk a bit more about the handoff or the intersection between this and marketing, and where does the line now cross, where things are, to my ears, they start to get very blurred between them. So how are you seeing that transition and those lines?
Yeah, I agree that they start getting more blurb, absolutely. It sounds like the salesperson used to be a channel, and now it's becoming more and more as, it used to be the channel, it's now becoming more a channel, right? One of the channels of driving revenue. And that's true, of course, for a PLG company, but I think that it's like the sales and buying process is going to move more and more towards that direction, where there's just going to be so many digital tools and assets that are driven by marketing as well, / enablement, product marketing, to just help sellers in these touch points. So if we break it down, I would go and take enablement, and either, it depends. Some companies I've seen have opened a buyer enablement role, right? They've defined really a buyer enablement role, a separate role.
Sits under the CRO or sales or marketing. I'm trying to put them in buckets. So help me out. Where do these guys fit? Where they should be?
I think they should be under the CRO or under sales. Okay, CRO might even own marketing. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, it should be sales, in my opinion, because basically the skills that you have, and I think it's also a challenge. That's like my personal thought. I know there are a lot of different opinions around this, but I think that one of the biggest problems with sales enablement in general, or enablement, is that it's been defined more as an learning and development skill, and a lot of the sales enablement tech is not really sales enablement. It's just content management, and then it solves a lot of marketing problems, like the whole big CMSs, right? They solve more marketing problems and marketing and sales alignment. So that turned, I think, a lot of the sales enablement role into more of a marketing job to be done, okay, covering more marketing needs. And then the hiring criteria a lot of time is just knowing how to do these things and knowing how to do L&D, learning and development, well. And I think that just puts that role where it's not going to do the most effective work, because to really enable sellers, you really need to understand sales, and to enable buyers and to create a better buying journey, and to understand how right now you, for example, introduce a business case element into your sales process as a critical buying tool, and how to design it. You need good sales experience. So I think it should be, under sales. But essentially, the bottom line is to take enablement from a focus on content and L&D and content for the seller, to see how you can introduce change that's focused more on the buyer. How can you look at the sales process and introduce the changes that I mentioned earlier, implement tools, implement content that just is focused more on the buyer versus helping the seller sell, which of course focusing on the buyer will help the seller sell, but it's just a deeper focus and different kind of tools.
So if we try to look at kind of the baby steps, so let's say a CRO is hearing this and saying, great, I want to kind of start transforming my organization to have this buyer enablement mindset, what would you say could be kind of the first steps you would recommend GTM leaders to think about or take as they want to start this journey?
Yeah, I think it starts with research. I think it starts with research around what I mentioned in the beginning, basically research about the buyer journey and buyer challenges and the friction in their journey, and start kind of understanding how they want to adapt the process towards that, and start kind of building a team. It might be your existing enablement manager, or you hire someone if you're a bigger organization, and just defining this process and start executing it, basically, with everything, all of the points that I just mentioned.
So to really investigate, right? Because we are behind the, a veil, right? We are behind the screen. We don't have full information. They're operating in the dark. We need to go out and seek this information of how these processes look like. So the first step you would recommend is dive deep into how those processes look like, and realize it's not just a sales responsibility to understand them, it's a whole GTM's, because you're now responsible of supporting those processes. And you would do this through, I would guess, interviews. You do this through, basically research, like you mentioned. What are the most effective ways from your experience as you're trying to figure those out? Because these aren't easily accessible. It's not like I can just go and read about those things, right? These are things that, and they can differ, right, from organization to organization. So how do you address those kind of challenges of lack of information and diversity in buying processes?
Yeah, they differ. So this is why you need to interview. You need to interview buyers and you need to interview sellers. And yes, there's research out there around buyer enablement. Both we write about, other companies write about it. So basically, there are a lot of tech categories that tie into buyer enablement. Digital sales reviews is one of them, but also interactive demos and video selling. So there are more tools out there that essentially focus on creating just a better buying journey, buying experience that solve buying complexity challenges that lead to indecision and lead to buyers avoiding speaking with the salesperson, not wanting and or failing to sell internally. So a lot of that is out there, and there's a lot of information that these companies are building. That would be my starting point.
Fantastic. First of all, I know we're just about out of time. So wanted to really thank you for taking this opportunity. I think this is a super exciting topic. We just kind of scratched the surface on the transformations in B2B selling, in B2B buying. And I think there are, of course, organizational challenges we talked about. So it's educating organizations, right? So, just on board of them, maybe like ABM or one thing, now bringing, so there's also this challenge of changing behaviors. And I'm sure changing behaviors of salespeople is not the easiest of tasks. And one other point that kind of, as you were talking, I think we're definitely, there was always this movement from coin operated salesmen, right? That was just about pushing numbers and the numbers would get us there. I think it's safe to say we're very much past these days, that it's just hitting numbers. So you have to dive deep into that, right?
Yeah, like the concept of the sales closer, there used to be, like, you can still see it in job descriptions. I need a closer, or people say, I need a closer. So what a closer was in the past was someone who could really, really push and pressure and be a hard closer, hard negotiator. And, like Wolf of Wall Street times. And I think the definition today of a closer is different. It's someone that really knows how to properly project manage the deal and how to, yes, have a sense of urgency. There are different traits, but it's just a different thing. Like, you have to be much more buyer centric, even as a good closer. Yeah.
Perfect. And on that closing note, I think that's a great time to end. Really want to thank you again for taking the time for speaking. I think it was a fantastic topic. and would love to follow. Anybody who wants to connect with you, how would you recommend connecting?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn,
That's
right?
yeah, that's the place. Hit me up. I'm trying to respond to all DMs. Sometimes, like now, I have a month delay, but most of the times I'm not. I don't. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, Gal, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and good luck.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks.
Cheers. All right, stop it.